For CEOs, a board's support can make all the difference. But knowing what kind of support to ask for isn't always obvious. Welcome to BoardVision, the official podcast of the NACD, the National Association of Corporate Directors. We share perspectives from leading corporate directors and explore what makes boards effective, including how they can help companies prepare for the future. In this episode, Wayne Peacock, Vice Chair of the Elizabeth Dole Foundation and the former CEO of USAA, and Dona Young, a director on the boards of USAA, NACD, and Spahn Rose, speak with NACD Director of Governance Content, Mallory Bucher. Peacock and Young served as co-chairs of the NACD 2025 Blue Ribbon Commission report on strengthening the board-CEO relationship. Together, they discuss how CEOs and boards can be better aligned in their expectations. They also explore ways directors can provide guidance without micromanaging, and why transparency is central to a high-functioning board-CEO relationship. Have you heard about the benefits of NACD's certification program? Today's boards operate in a dynamic and rapidly evolving world. The National Association of Corporate Directors provides directorship certification that sets the standard for high-impact board directors. It's more than certification. This is the premier program, preparing directors to successfully navigate an increasingly complex business and governance landscape. NACD's directorship certification will enable you to demonstrate commitment, deliver confidently, and create real value for your organization. Learn more and apply today at nacdonline.org. And now, your host.
So let's start with what isn't working as well as it could. Wayne, what's the biggest misalignment that you see today between CEO and board expectations?
Well, certainly we can talk about strategy and vision. I think that is something that can be objectively teased out to ensure that both the CEO and the board have the same view of where the company needs to go. But I think that's one of the challenges is maybe the CEO thinks we should be going to the left and board members think we're going to the right, or maybe to put more precision around this, that, we should be working on organic growth versus maybe, doing transactions to drive growth further. And then I think at times we might think about loud voices in the boardroom as the voice of the board, as opposed to all of the voices in the boardroom. And that too can create misalignment, especially with folks with a strong opinion who may not always voice those in open settings. I also think some of the research in the market today tells you that there is a gap between whether CEOs feel that boards have their back and whether boards feel that they have the CEO's back. And I think it's important to continue to have the right trust-building behaviors in your boardroom and outside of the boardroom to close that misconception. And then maybe one that's vitally important for us to talk about is the misalignment between whether every director on the board is both qualified and performing. And if you were to ask CEOs about that today, their view is much different than board members themselves.
Donna, do you agree with the factors that Wayne just mentioned?
I do agree with the factors that Wayne just mentioned, and I would add perhaps even a more basic issue to respond to your question. I think that each board has its own culture, and I think there's a basic lack of clarity often between what the board expects of the CEO and what the CEO wants of the board itself. So even before you get to strategy or you get to some of the other issues, it's about what do you expect from each other? How do you treat each other? What are your norms of behavior? And it's interesting because reflecting back on the opportunity that Wayne and I had to co-chair last year's Blue Ribbon Commission report, we spent a lot of time talking about that. You might call it the right culture fit, but it's a significantly important topic. And the more clarity you have on those basic expectations of each other up front, the better the chances are that you're going to get it right and you're going to work together and you're going to have the basis for forming a true partnership. And I'll tell you that I am now using that question, what do you expect of the board, as I am interviewing CEO candidates as part of a search committee for one of the boards I'm on. And I use that question in the first interview because if someone answers, I really don't have any expectations of the board, or I just expect to be able to report to the board 4 times a year, guess what? That's not going to be a good answer for what I'm expecting of a CEO.
And Mallory, someone asked this question the other day, but I think it's really relevant to what Donna just talked about. And the question was, what is the one thing that you would suggest a brand new CEO and the chair or the lead independent director do in the beginning of their relationship? And I think it's easy to talk about the many things that need to be done, but the clarity around how are we going to work together and what are your expectations of me and mine of you form the foundation that allow you then to deal with whatever challenges may come your way or take full advantages of the opportunities that are in front of the company.
The question sounds so simple, but I know it doesn't always get asked so directly, and it can be really powerful to hear from both sides. We hear from CEOs that, during high stress and uncertainty, which you certainly are feeling today, they want more value from their board. So Wayne, when you were CEO, what did you want most from your board that really made a real difference in how you led?
Let's start first with a topic we've been discussing, and that is creating mutual trust between the CEO and the board members. And I think that's based on the transparency, as we talked earlier today, that CEOs can and should deliver. But it's also the courage of both the CEO and board members to have the candid conversation about how things are going well or not so well, which help each party in the relationship to actually adjust, adapt, and improve going forward. I think CEOs want strategic engagement from their board. They want the support to be able to use their board broadly and their board members individually as strategic advisors to help navigate the kind of crazy waters that we are all in. But they also don't want boards to take that license to then micromanage and actually get into the day-to-day operation. So I think about that as healthy challenge, but without overstepping the board's role in terms of governance. I also think that CEOs want to make sure that every director who is on the team is carrying their weight and is the best possible candidate to be able to help the CEO and the company move forward. And then lastly, the chair of the lead independent director as a strategic partner, as a mentor, as someone who can support and carry the water for them as you navigate all of the relationships with the board.
Let's go back to when you talked about boards are there to challenge, but there is that fine line between healthy and unproductive tension. When directors challenge you, Wayne, what kept the trust? And then conversely, what really hurt it?
I think if you have the confidence that the board has your back and you have the confidence in your own ability and you recognize that those questions may be challenging, but they're meant to improve performance and you hold them in that context, then no matter how challenging the room gets, you should be able to address and deal with it. But if you don't have that level of trust and it feels like a gotcha, I think the opposite can be true as well.
So Donna, as a board member, how do you go about framing a challenge so, it lands the right way with the CEO?
The first thing is pretty clear. Use open-ended questions. When a board member starts with a preamble that tells you exactly how they did it when they did it, that usually does not open up the CEO or management team in a way that becomes receptive to whatever the idea or the suggestion might be. And it could be a great suggestion. So it's more about asking open-ended questions and really probing, understanding, listening clearly to understand what management is thinking through, and then offering up ideas, but in ways that don't evoke defensiveness and aren't trust blockers, because that is really, really quite important. The other thing that I think Wayne talked about, and this is a topic unto itself, what I think CEOs want are board members who truly are equipped to be sitting around that table and adding value. And we can go through all kinds of iterations of skill set matrices, and certain skill sets are quite critical. But in addition to the skill sets, a CEO wants to see that there is a culture fit and that the board is comprised of people who are there to support, to collaborate, and to challenge. And to know when the moment is to challenge and call the question, and when the moment is to support, advise, and to encourage.
Better, smarter, engaged directors make CEOs better, enhance company performance as well. Mallory, two other quick tactics are, what are the underlying assumptions that led you to the course of action that you might be presenting today, right? Which is an opportunity to get one level, not 5 levels, but one level underneath to how the management team was thinking about the topic that then drew them to the conclusion or the course of action that they may be recommending. And the other is, if this is the best choice, what were the other choices that you might have discarded and why? I think those are the kinds of open-ended questions, but probing questions that get into the mindset of the management team and how they thought about what they're packaging and bringing to the board.
You know, another way to frame a question too, in addition to the good points Wayne just said, just simply asking, would it be helpful to you if I fill in the blank? Because sometimes that fill in the blank may be introduced you to so-and-so, provided you some information on how we approached this when I was in your role, whatever it might be. In that way, you're opening up to the CEO, but you're also asking them permission in the sense of how far they really want your help at that moment.
And that also maybe comes back to the point I made earlier about kind of the magic of a good relationship to actually use your board collectively or individually as a strategic advisor, whether that's opening a door somewhere, whether that's bringing insight from a previous transaction that adds to the corpus of knowledge that the CEO may have.
Can we go back to discussing the lead director or the board chair role? Wayne, what does a CEO really want from those roles? We talk in the report that really is the linchpin of the relationship.
Well, I'll speak very personally, with my 2 chairs during my tenure at USAA. What I had in each of those cases was a very smart, intelligent, and caring individual who had my best interest at heart and who had the company's best interest at heart. So that's the starting place, right? Is to have kind of the right caliber person with the right mindset. But what I built in each of those cases, or what we built together, was a personal relationship that was based on a formal set of behaviors and engagements, and more importantly, an informal set of behaviors and engagements that enabled us to have a really strong, trusting relationship. But it also enabled the chair to have better context about what was happening at the company so that he, in this case, could actually provide advice or strategic challenge for me that was very relevant. And at the same time, able to, in military terms, carry the water, if you will, with other board members when necessary, because each of them had spent the time to truly understand what I was thinking and the issues that the company was dealing with at a much deeper level, given the informal and formal relationship that we built.
Yeah, that leads to, another point that, the CEO role is so personally demanding and asks a lot of the person behind the title. It sounds like your lead director was certainly there for you and checking in. What else does your board do that supported your well-being?
Whether it was the head of the comp committee, whether it was the lead independent or chair, or critical leaders of each one of our committees, every one of our board members took an interest in how I was doing, how I was feeling, how my family was. And that sent a very strong message that people matter. It also reinforced the culture downstream in the organization for me as well, that people matter a lot. You don't get anything done without having a great team and without having great team members. So that kind of personal interest and care, and not just at a quarterly board member meeting, but checking in on a regular basis, meant a lot to know that, they have my back.
Donna, what approaches do you use?
Well, I think a lot of what Wayne just said. I think it's also important to know your CEO and how they're wired, because sometimes advice and the expression of what you think is caring can be counter to what that CEO needs. For example, some CEOs are hardwired in a way that they don't want to unplug all the time. If that's the way they are, that's okay. Other CEOs have more defined limits as to how they want to spend their free time. I think it's important to express your care and concern, as Wayne has articulated, to build a personal relationship. I mean, human kindness goes a long way, no matter what's happening. And to give a CEO permission to be human, to take the time out, to have real emotion, and to, as much as you can as a board member, be devoid of judgment, because each of us is wired a little differently. And we have to respect that. And I think when you go back to the question about the chairman of the board or the lead independent director, the other thing I would say, because I've been a chairman and a lead independent director, and it is really the linchpin relationship. You need to have someone in that role who is prepared to work really hard, be available whenever required, and to have uncomfortable conversations, not just with the CEO, but with their colleagues, which is often even trickier than having that uncomfortable conversation with the CEO. But if you truly are going to help create the right board culture and the right board and CEO dynamic, that's your job as chairman or lead independent director.
So one could fill in the blank a bit and say, in the post-mortem of the board meeting, board director A at that point in time was really not helpful, sir. And let's strategize on how we're going to help that person adjust behavior. But that comes back to having the courage as the CEO to give that kind of candid feedback to the board chair, but also a board chair who is prepared to lean in and help create the right culture for everyone who is part of the board team.
Courage is certainly a key takeaway of this discussion. During our last episode, we talked about how assumptions can really get in the way of a trusted relationship. And Donna, you just raised one about, you can't assume that what worked for one CEO will work with another. Wayne, what's one assumption that CEOs make about boards that turns out to not be true?
I think when times are tough or there are challenges and there are challenging questions that come, CEOs could make the assumption that the boards don't trust them, board members don't trust them, or that they don't have confidence in them, when in fact, directors are just doing their due diligence of probing to understand so that the company can make better decisions going forward. And I think you have to resist the tendency to be defensive when those challenges come, and resist the temptation to not believe best intentions when those challenges come, because just about everyone who's in this game is trying to do their best work every day and do it for a very important reason, which is to help their company be successful.
Well said. Donna, Wayne, thank you. We heard that when this relationship works, it really works and can be certainly be a real advantage, but it takes continual effort, intentionality on both sides to get there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mallory.
Thank you, Mallory.
Be sure to listen to our last episode where we discuss what boards really want from their CEOs.
That concludes this episode of BoardVision. We hope you enjoyed listening. Please subscribe and join us next time. Until then, visit NACDonline.org to stay informed about the latest resources NACD has to offer, such as memberships, certification, national or chapter events, and our content, including reports, articles, and Directorship Magazine. That's NACDonline.org. Thank you for listening.